on resolving the contradiction. We work on finding a way to counteract the harmful function, or what degrades, or find a way to modify a useful function. So now we start to get into Triz operators, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So, what did we just do? We brainstormed. And Altshuler had different levels of solving the problem. So remember I told you that there were 4 key things that Altshuler. So he said many times people wouldn't even get a patent for level 1, but sometimes a patent is given anyway for a natural extension of what people already do. And he said it's just a small continuous improvement, readily accessible, and you really wouldn't need any other information or help other than what it is you've got in your own experience and knowledge to come up with level 1. Level 2, Altshuler said, was small improvement in an existing system, usually with some compromise. And to come up with a solution at level 2, I might need the knowledge that exists not only within my own mind, but within my natural work team. And in level 2, we're typically taking 2 pieces of knowledge from our field and combining them together. So if my field is mechanical engineering, and I take one piece of knowledge from mechanical engineering and combine it with another piece of knowledge from mechanical engineering, come up with a new idea, that would be an example of a level 2. Level 3, Altshuler said, is an essential improvement of an existing system, but it's still inside your paradigm. So if my paradigm is I'm an engineer, and I happen to be a mechanical engineer, and I take one piece of knowledge from mechanical engineering, and I take another piece of knowledge from some other engineering field, maybe it's electrical engineering, and I take these 2 engineering pieces of knowledge and combine them together to get a new idea, Altshuler said that that's a level 3. So for level 3, to solve a problem at level 3, I might need, the knowledge that exists in the engineering group in my company. Not just my natural work team, but I might need to canvass the knowledge that exists within all the engineers in my company. Level 4 would be an invention outside my paradigm. So it's a concept for a new generation of an existing system based on changing the principle of it performing the primary function. So it'll be like a jet aircraft or an integrated circuit. And level 4, to come up with a level 4, I need to take a concept or an idea from engineering and then combine it with a concept or an idea from some other field, maybe biology. And I bring them together to come up with a new idea. So that would be an example of level 4. And to find a solution at level 4, I might need all the knowledge inside my own corporation to come up with an idea at level 4. Level 5 would be the discovery of an essentially new system like a laser, a radio, or an airplane. And I might need the knowledge, all existing knowledge, to come up with an idea at level 5. So when I had a problem, there's a solution. I can solve that problem at any level. I can come up with a solution at level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 to solve a particular problem. And if I solve it at level 1, I'll make a small continuous improvement. Maybe it won't be much of a solution. And I can just use the knowledge I have myself. Level 2, I might need the knowledge in my company and my natural work group. Level 3, the knowledge that exists in my industry. Level 4, the knowledge that exists in society. Level 4 is all that's knowable. Level 5 is all that's knowable. So to find solutions at higher levels, the solution space we have to look through just keeps growing and growing and growing. So if we were doing it by trial and error, the numbers of trials and errors I would need to find a solution at higher levels keeps increasing and increasing and increasing. So when Altshuler did his original work, he said that level 1 solutions represented about 32% of the patent database. It would be bigger than that, but many times a patent wouldn't be granted at level 1. Level 2, he said, was about 45%. Level 3 was about 18%. Level 4 was about 4%. And level 5 was about 1%. After looking at 3 million patents, this is what the analysis of 3 million patents came out to be. And interestingly enough, for those of you who like statistics, and who here doesn't, right? Shiro? No. It comes out to be a perfect normal distribution. That level 1 is actually operating at 1 sigma, which is 68.3% of inventions are level 1. Level 2 is actually turned out to be 2 sigma. Level 3 turned out to be 3 sigma. Level 4 at 4 sigma. Level 5 at 5 sigma. And why it is a perfect normal distribution, I don't know, but it just, the data came out that way. So there might be some reason for it, but that's the way the data came out. And from Morris and Allah's thoughts, to come up with level 1, if you were doing it by trial and error, it might take units of trials and errors to come up with level 1. Maybe dozens of trials and errors to come up with a solution at level 2. Hundreds of trials and errors to come up with a solution at level 3. Thousands and dozens of thousands to come up with a solution at level 4. And hundreds, thousands, and millions of trials and errors to come up with a solution at level 5. Einstein is 5 or 6 sigma, yeah. And Einstein, would be at level 5, but his is kind of even rarer, among all the level 5 solutions. His is even, higher. So maybe he would be, like 6 sigma. Now, when I have a problem, we may come up with certain concepts to solve the problem. And within each of these concepts, there could be certain variants that go out in terms of solutions. The solution to my problem may lie over here. But I might have a preference for concept 3. And Morris and Allah and the Triz people call it psychological inertia. It's just my own personal prejudice or bias. For whatever reason, I really like, concept number 3. So I'm going to go off in terms of concept number 3, and I'm going to start hitting some variants. And it may take a while before I find the variant that leads me to the solution. That's typically the way we do things. And what my psychological bias is based on is largely on what I'm comfortable with in terms of my background. So if I happen to be a mechanical engineer and I have a problem, I'm going to start searching for a mechanical engineering solution to that problem. Now there may be a fabulous solution using chemical effects, but since I'm not a chemist, I don't really feel comfortable exploring that area of the solution space, at least not initially. And so I'm off here looking for a solution based on what I'm comfortable with and my own personal biases, where the solution might exist in a region where I'm not so comfortable. Now what Triz does is it provides for us guided brainstorming. And the guided brainstorming is based around what Altshuler found by studying patents. So what Triz does is it says that based on the experience of a lot of people who had similar system conflicts, Triz says, look for your solution in this direction. And what Triz does is it helps you to brainstorm, but the brainstorming is guided based upon the experience of other people who have had similar types of system conflicts. So Triz provides a vector that says brainstorm in this direction. And you can see that as I move from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to level 4 to level 5, the solution space I need to search through grows, but it grows much more slowly than the entire solution space grows if I had no vector for guidance. So this is how Triz works. And the next step in the software deals with what Altshuler did. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to resolve technical contradictions, physical contradictions, using different systems of operators, and how Triz approaches the solution. So what Altshuler did is he studied the patent database. And as he's studying the patent database, he begins to realize that the same fundamental problems have been addressed by a number of inventions in different areas of technology. And he began to observe that the same fundamental solutions were used over and over again, often separated by many years. And he reasoned that if the latter inventor had knowledge of the earlier solution, their task would have been pretty straightforward. And so Altshuler really devoted his life to extracting, compiling, and organizing this kind of information. So Boris and Alla picture it like this. So we have a picture like this. You can also look at it like this. That here are the two functions for your technical contradiction, and we're trying to balance them. And underneath there's a control parameter, that's the physical contradiction. So you can look at it this way, if this picture is helpful. I want inexperienced labor because it's cheap, but I don't want inexperienced labor because of risk of injury. So I want inexperienced labor because it's cheap, but I don't want inexperienced labor because of the risk of injury. So this is expense, risk of injury, balanced on I want inexperienced labor, but I don't want inexperienced labor for my state problem. So C should be high and C should be low. So you can also look at it this way. So here's a situation where I have a pepper. So, this could be a sweet pepper, a bell pepper. For you guys, it's going to be a hot pepper, because you like your food super spicy. So, I have a pepper and I want to prepare it for cooking. And to do that, I have to clean the pepper, so I have to remove the seeds. So if I have just a few peppers to do for my home, it's easy. I take a knife, I cut open the top of the pepper, and I scoop out the seeds. But if I have thousands and thousands and thousands of peppers to prepare, then I really don't want to take all the time to carefully remove all those seeds. It's just, the more thoroughly I remove the seeds, the longer time it takes. So I want to prepare the pepper and thoroughly remove the seeds, but I don't want to thoroughly remove the seeds and prepare the pepper because it takes so much time. So I've got a problem. So Altshuler, when he looked at the patent database, this is his original work, he said, in this patent, what characteristics are conflicting? And he came up with 39 generic characteristics. So if I'm looking at this pepper problem, I want to thoroughly remove the seeds. Remove seeds. So if I'm thinking about thoroughly removing the seeds, and I'm looking at Altshuler's 39 parameters. Now in your notebook, at the back of the notebook, the last tab, the pink tab, no, next to the last tab, the green tab. It's a book, An Introduction to the Triz, The Theory of Inventive Problem Solving by Stan Kaplan. Second to last tab. And if I go to the back of that book, I see Altshuler's matrix, his original matrix. And I see these 39 characteristics that are on pages 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, and 54. So it's Appendix 2. So these are generic characteristics that Altshuler selected by looking at patents. So I am interested in thoroughly removing the seeds. Okay? Thoroughly removing the seeds. So which of these parameters is related to thoroughly removing seeds? What would be related to thoroughly removing seeds? Speed. Okay, speed. There's another issue here, which is time. It takes time. It takes time. Okay, is speed related to taking time or to thoroughly removing the seeds? Speed is related to taking time, right? So speed is, what number? 9? So I have number 9, which is speed. It's related to taking time. What about thoroughly removing the seeds? Anything related to thoroughly removing seeds?
Volume.
Okay, volume of a moving object or non-moving object? Okay, 8, volume of a non-moving object. So 8, volume. Pardon? That's a good one, right? Amount of substance, 26. Anything else related to thoroughly removing seeds?
Complexity of device.
Pardon?
36.
36, complexity.
Device is using to remove the seed.
Complexity. Device. Meaning the more thoroughly I remove the seeds, the more complex the device becomes. So we would continue to list numbers here that relate to our problem, thoroughly removing the seeds. And then across the top, we're interested, it takes too long. Anything else? Energy, where's that? Right? A moving object or non-moving? Maybe non-moving, 20? So the way we would use Altshuler's original matrix is we've got an issue between thoroughly removing seeds and taking time. And it relates to these generic characteristics that Altshuler came up with: speed, waste of time, energy, volume, amount of substance, complexity. Now we would look at Altshuler's table. So you have the table in your notebook. And so if I want to improve the amount of substance, and when I try to improve the amount of substance, I sacrifice speed. So amount of substance here is 26. Speed is number 9. So if I go in these tables to row 26,
Page 52, appendix 2.
page 52, 26, row 26, and I move over to column 9, speed, I see 4 numbers there: 35, 29, 34, 28. So it's 35, 29, 34, 28. Okay, so there are 4 principles here to look at. Now let's go do this for all of these. If I have row 26 and column 25, waste of time, what is it I get? Row 26 and column 25.
So you have one number 6.
35, 38, 18, and 16, right? 35,
38.
35, 38, 18, and 16. And what about row 26, column 20?
You have 3, 35, 31.
3, 35, 31.
Just 3 numbers.
Okay. What about row number 8, column number 9? Everyone find row number 8, column number 9? What do we get? It's empty. Okay. Row number 8, column 25.
35, 16, 32, 80.
35, 16, 32, and what?
18.
18. What about row 8, column 20?
Subtract.
Blank. Row 36, column 9. All right, what? 116.
36 and row number 9.
Row 36, column 9.
Oh, 3 numbers. 34,
34,
10, 28.
34, 10, 28. Row 36, column 25.
6 and 29.
2
Pardon?
numbers.
6 and 29.
6 and 29. Column 36, row 20.
It's the black box.
Right? Okay. So we've looked at what we're interested in, thoroughly removing the seeds and taking time. We looked at what parameters could fit this from Altshuler's matrix. And we start to see certain numbers appearing more than once, like 35 is used 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So if I was coaching you, I'd say, hey, let's start with principle 35 and start to brainstorm around that. So if I go to 35, here's Altshuler's principles. 35 is a transformation principle, change a parameter. So here in your book, Stan Kaplan's booklet, just before the matrix are a list of principles. There's a principle 35, transformation of physical and chemical states. change an aggregate state of an object, concentration or density, the degree of flexibility, or the temperature. So I might try to think of a way to do that. Now I mentioned that Triz is useful for technical and non-technical situations. So Altshuler did his original work with technical systems. Since then, his students have done a lot of work in applying Triz to non-technical systems. So at the end of your notebook, on the pink tab, is an article by Daryl Mann and Ellen Dillon. And these are the Triz principles, but lists of non-technical examples. So if I go to principle 35, parameter change, here are some non-technical examples of a parameter change, like virtual prototyping, or virtual shopping, or telephone banking would be changes in the physical state. Change the concentration or consistency, might be change the team structure, introduce a store introduces a special offer. Change the degree of flexibility, might be software with options for beginners through experts. So these are different. So this article has some people have brainstormed and done some research on what are some non-technical examples of these principles. So I might start with principle 35 and then brainstorm around that and see how many ideas I can get. And then I would look for other principles that are used quite frequently. Like 34 is used a couple times here. 16 is used here a couple of times. 18 is used a couple of times. 29 is used a couple of times. 28 is used a couple times. So, we would brainstorm around these. So if I'm looking at just this box here, amount of substance and speed, and I've got principle 35, 29, 34, 28, which are all used a few times. Principle 35 says for this pepper problem, see if I can't change something, maybe the concentration of density. Principle 29 says, use pneumatics or hydraulics. Is there a way that I could change maybe the density using air or water for inflation? Principle 34 says, reuse some other aspect of your system. So is there some aspect of the system with the pepper that it's already completed its function, but I want to reuse it in a different way? So is there some aspect of the pepper that maybe the body of the pepper itself, the inside of the pepper, I can reuse in a different way by maybe using air or water for inflation or changing the density? And then principle 28 says, don't even think about trying to do this mechanically, cleaning these peppers with a knife. You'll never resolve your contradiction or your conflict trying to do this mechanically. So we look at these and we try to come up with ideas. What ideas can you come up with from Altshuler's original system? Now in 1973, this method was created. So someone came up with the idea that they would take these peppers and put them into a chamber and then increase the pressure to 5 to 8 atmospheres of pressure. So as you increase the pressure, you get 5 to 8 atmospheres of pressure outside the pepper, 1 atmosphere of pressure inside the pepper. The pepper begins to cave in and microcracks develop where the pepper is weakest, which is around the stem. And then the pressure equalizes, so I've got 5 to 8 atmospheres of pressure inside the pepper as well as outside. Then I very quickly release the pressure in the chamber. Now I have 1 atmosphere of pressure outside the pepper, 5 to 8 atmospheres inside the pepper. The top blows off the pepper and all the seeds come out with it. So I can clean a large number of peppers very quickly. So you can see that, you know, Altshuler's principles didn't give me the solution, but it gave me hints as to what the solution could look like. You know, I could change the concentration of density. I could use air for inflation. I could use a part of the pepper, the space inside the pepper, in a different way, and clean the peppers, but not do it mechanically. Do it with changes in pressure. So it's still a leap to go from Altshuler's principles to, you know, the inventive idea. So that's using Altshuler's original matrix, and there's lots of people who that's what they teach about Triz, is Altshuler's original matrix, and they don't know anything more about Triz. And you can still use Altshuler's matrix. It's helpful, but it's not anywhere near as helpful as the software we'll be using. And we could do an exercise with Altshuler's matrix today, but I'm not going to take the time right this second. But we may do an exercise with Altshuler's matrix. But I want to talk some more first about these contradictions. Probably time for a break. So is this a tea break?
Yes, it is.
It's a tea break. But you'll have to do them two at a time.
Larry, before we start, we'd like to make some announcements. Now, for those of you who drive, does anyone drive there? Does anyone drive here?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. What we're going to do is we're going to collect all of the parking tickets to have it validated in the lobby. Validated, yeah. Oh, you already got it validated. Okay. Well, for those of you who has not done that, Chris here is going to pick all of the cards, parking ticket cards, so that we get validated. Chris, make sure you remember those. All right.
I thought I had to pay some money.
You pay when you're going up.
Leave you pay.
Pay when you're going up.
Please, you have that.
Okay. So, I want to continue. And Altshuler's original matrix deals with this side. So this matrix deals with the technical contradictions and principles that have been known from the past to resolve those technical contradictions. So Altshuler's original work had 40 principles. After looking at 3 million patents, in the Innovation Workbench software there are embedded 440 principles, and in the Knowledge Wizard there's 140 for non-technical systems. So the software is much more rich in terms of principles than Altshuler's original work, based on the subsequent work of Altshuler's students. So that's the way to deal with the technical contradiction. But there's also a physical contradiction here. And when Altshuler realized that there were physical contradictions behind every technical contradiction, he got very excited because the number of principles for technical contradictions kept growing and growing and growing. But there are only 4 ways of addressing a physical contradiction. And so he felt that you could make problem solving much simpler if you started on this side with the physical contradiction. And so let's look at the physical contradiction side for a moment. Now, a physical contradiction is where a function conflicts with itself. So you want the function to be at 2 different levels at the same time, or you want the function to be present and absent at the same time, which is another way of having 2 different levels. Here's an example of a physical contradiction in a Chevrolet Silverado truck. But I want to use my cup holders, but I don't want to use my cup holders because when I use my cup holders, I can't use my ashtray. Very simple physical contradiction. So I want my cup holders to be there, but I don't want them to be there. And Altshuler found there's only 4 ways to resolve a physical contradiction. That you can separate the requirements in space, you can separate them in time, separate between the parts and the whole, or you can separate based upon condition. So here's an example of separation in space. The characteristic can be made larger in one place and smaller than another, like a funnel. So I want the funnel to have a large area to make it easy to pour something into, but I want it to have a small area so I can direct the fluid. So that separating those 2 requirements in space creates a funnel. A characteristic is present in one place and absent in another. So Benjamin Franklin created bifocal glasses. So he has one lens in one place to see close, another lens in another place to provide distance vision, separating those 2 lenses in space. So here's the separation in space for the Ford truck. You can use your cup holder and your ashtray at the same time because they're separated in space. Here's a separation in space on a Dodge truck. The ashtray and the cup holder separated in space. Here's a separation in space. What was the conflict here in this bridge between Sweden and Denmark? What was their conflict, their physical conflict? Huh?
Seawater.
Okay. They wanted a bridge, inexpensive bridge, to go from connect the land, Sweden to Denmark. But they also didn't want a bridge so that boats could go through, right? So, how did they separate the requirements in space? Yeah, they said we'll have a tunnel for a portion of it. So the boats can go as the cars go through the tunnel, and then we'll use an inexpensive bridge for the rest of the distance, separating the requirements in space. Now here's an inventive fellow. He needs to cut the grass, but he also wants to ride his bike. So he created a bicycle that cuts grass. Now you can also separate in time. Think of a retailer. Retailer of a store, we talked about it earlier today, wants to make a high profit, so they want a high sales price to get a profit, but they want a low sales price to move the merchandise. So they've got this physical contradiction of wanting a high price and a low price. You separate those in space. So how does a retailer separate it in space? Okay, you can have a clearance area. So this portion of the store, items in this area of the store are on sale. So they can separate a sale or a low-cost area from a normal cost area. Now you can also separate in time. So a characteristic is made larger at one time and smaller during another time, or it's present at one point in time and absent at another point in time. How does a retailer resolve the contradiction of price by separating in time? Seasonal sale. Yeah. So after Christmas sale, so at one time you have a discount price, another time you have a regular price. Separating in time. So for the wing problem, the wings of some military aircraft can be extended to provide a larger area for takeoff and landing, and retracted for high-speed flight. So I have a large area for takeoff and landing and a small wing area for flight. or a characteristic can be present at one time, absent during another. So think of a staple. A staple is pointed as it pierces through the paper. Then the staple is bent flat to hold the papers together. So at one time I want the staple to be sharp and to penetrate. Another time I want the staple flat and to hold. So you separate those requirements in time. Another way of handling the physical contradiction is to separate between the parts and the whole. So you utilize the supersystem or the subsystem, and you put one characteristic at the system level and another characteristic at the supersystem or the subsystem level. So my son, for example, he got very much into this extreme game sports with bikes. So he used to like to ride his bike up the ramps and do tricks. And the only time he got injured is he was in the middle of a trick when his chain broke. So after that, we got the biggest, heaviest chain we could find for his bike. And we replaced it periodically. And you think of a chain, and we wanted that chain to be very strong and sturdy. And yet the chain also has to be very flexible so that it can fulfill its function on the bike itself. And notice what they did to resolve the contradiction of the chain. You have a link of a chain which is very inflexible and very sturdy and very wide and very strong. But the combination of the links in the system make the chain very flexible. So I take the requirement of flexibility, put that in the system, and the subsystem for the components, I have very rigid components with a very flexible system structure. So I can separate the requirements needed between the parts and the whole. So a characteristic exists at the system level and does not exist at the component level, or vice versa. So you can take epoxy resin and epoxy hardener. I want to store them for a long period of time, so I can store them in two separate containers, and then when I need them, I can mix them together so that they will harden. So the liquids, they can be stored as liquids by separating the components. And when I put them into a system, they can become solid when mixed. So I've separated the parts from the whole. So I put one aspect of the system and the component that I want to be able to store them easily as liquids, two separate liquids. But then when I mix them as the system, they become whole. Separating between the parts and the whole. Think of the retailer. They have a situation where they want to have a high price to make a profit, but they want a low price to move the merchandise. They also have a strategy of separating between the parts and the whole. So for example, if you buy one pair of shoes from me, you pay full price, but if you buy the second pair of shoes, you pay a 50% discount. Right? So the component price for one pair of shoes is a certain level, but if you go to the system level and you buy two pairs of shoes, you get a discount. So separation between the parts and the whole. So here's an example of separation between the parts and the whole. So they want the ship's hull to be wide to be stable, but they want the ship's hull to be narrow to be speedy to reduce drag. So you have one parameter, the width of the ship's hull, and how can you separate this between the parts and the whole? You have it both wide and narrow at the same time. So the parts are narrow. So here's a trimaran. So the parts are narrow, but the system is wide. So I got one characteristic at the system level, the second characteristic at the component level. So I've got narrow, but then in the system I've got the width for stability. So I get speed and stability.
So you call that system and
It's a separation between the parts and the whole. So I took one part of the contradiction and I resolved it with the parts. And I put the second part of the contradiction and resolved it with the system. So I wanted width for stability. So I get width in the system, but I wanted narrow for speed, and I've got narrow from the components of the system. Separating between the parts and the whole. Now we can also separate on condition. So a characteristic can be high under one condition and low under another condition. So C was porous for liquids but solid for sand. Or a characteristic can be present under one condition and absent under another. So light sensitive circuit is open in the presence of light, closed in the dark. We talked about a seat belt or a seat airbag. Let's say an airbag automobile. We wanted it to deploy quickly to protect an adult, but slowly so it wouldn't harm a child. So that got resolved on condition. So in the passenger seat there's a sensor, and depending upon the weight of the person on that seat, the airbag will deploy quickly or slowly. So depending on the condition of the weight of the person, the airbag speed is set or programmed based on condition. What about the retailer who wants a high price and a low price? How could they separate based on condition?
different tax type.
Okay, if you came to the Lean Applied seminar, we'll give you a discount on the software. That's a condition. Or if you belong to a certain age group, or you're a member of the military, you get a discount. So there's a condition.
Student cards.
A student card, yes.
Like for Chinese, premium price for some item and lower price for generic item.
Okay? That's a condition. That's a very good example of a condition. Separation on condition. So the generic medication has a lower price than the branded medication. So here's an exercise. This was something that Boris Lupin worked on earlier in his career. To plate metal parts with nickel, they're placed in a bath of nickel salt. The bath is heated to increase productivity, but the solution becomes unstable. So what happens is you have these metal parts that get put into a nickel bath for plating. You want the temperature to be high so that you can, the plating operation will go faster, but the higher the temperature, the quicker the bath solution becomes unstable. The salts become unstable. So what we need to do is we need to map this out, diagram a situation like this. What does this look like? So first, each of you, just silently by yourself, map what this looks like. You want something to happen because it does this, but you don't want this to happen because it does this. And then work on this end of it using the separation principles. Can I separate this in space or in time or between the parts and the whole, or can I separate on condition? See if you can come up with an idea using one or more of the separation principles. So I'll give you a couple minutes to work on this, and then we'll talk about it. Technical and the physical contradiction. So how do we formulate it? We want something to happen because it does this, and we don't want it to happen because it does this. what goes here?
Heating process.
Okay, temperature or,
Temperature.
okay, bath temperature. We want the bath temperature to be what? To be high, to increase what? Productivity. Well, we want the bath temperature to be low because life of the bath, right? Bath life, stability. Bath life. Now, if we were using Altshuler's matrix, we would work on productivity and stability. But here we're going to work on this end, the physical contradiction. So I want the bath temperature to be high, and I want the bath temperature to be low. So can we separate this in space?
Yes,
How can we separate in space?
we have two furnaces.
Huh?
We have two furnaces.
Two furnaces?
Yes,
How?
one for low temperature, one for high temperature.
Okay. And where is the low temperature and where is the high temperature?
The low temperature is for stability, and the
Well,
high
where is
temperature-
it in the bath? So here's my bath. Here are my parts. Where do I want the low temperature? Where do I want the high temperature?
You can have a separator. You can have a separator, and then separate the flame. One for high temperature flame, and the other one is low temperature flame.
Okay.
It's like a gradient, tiny temperature gradient in the bath. And when you cut the bath into,
If we make it like a plane, planes, when you need it,
Because you can control the flame. Control the flame, that gives you low temperature, and that will make the process stable. On the other side, you can have high temperature, that will give you high
But this is like
temperature.
a conveyor line, so parts are coming in and out of here all the time. So, but where in here do we want the high temperature?
bottom,
Huh? Where do we want the high temperature? What's being plated? The parts, right? We want the bath to be very hot around the parts, but away from the parts, where do you want the bath temperature to be? Low. So around the part, I want the bath temperature to be hot. Away from the part, I want the bath temperature to be low. Separating in space. Now you have a secondary problem here. How do I heat the bath that way? So we solved the first problem.
That's for the
We're going to separate in space. We know we need to separate in space by having the bath around the part very hot, the rest of the bath to be cool. Now we have a secondary problem. How are we going to make it that way? How can we make the bath temperature very hot around the part and very cool elsewhere?
you can install it. Where is the
We're going to install a heating coil where?
on the plate itself, on the plate on
Around the part?
yeah,
When?
during the baking process. Something like that.
Well, if the parts were hot before they went into the bath, then the parts could heat the bath salt just around the part.
Yeah.
So I want the part to be hot before it goes into the bath and keep the rest of the bath cool, so I eliminate this fire. So how do I heat the part up hot before it goes into the bath?
Put the furnace.
You can,
We can use
you can,
an induction heating coil,
Or you can install the furnace before the thing.
put the furnace on the part itself before it goes into the bath. So there's several ways.
you can heat up the atmosphere differently. One part has got higher atmospheric pressure, another part got lower atmospheric pressure.
Okay?
That one is evolutionary. Idea.
So the technical contradiction, heat increases productivity to waste material. Control parameters, temperature. Temperature should be high to increase productivity and low to avoid waste. So apply separation in space. The high temperature is necessary near the parts. The parts can be heated rather than the solution. So that's a solution to that. You would be absolutely amazed at how many problems you can solve by just thinking about the physical contradiction and applying these 4 separation principles. Just very simple. Separating in space, separating in time, separating between the parts and the whole, separating upon condition. People are coming up with many, many, many patents just using those 4 simple principles. Now, we're going to practice with those principles, and we'll look at the software in a minute. But I want to cover something else first, and that is further developments in Triz, transitioning from principles to operators. So remember, Altshuler found the same fundamental problems have been addressed by different inventions. The same fundamental solutions were used over and over again, separated by many years. So these fundamental solutions are Boris and Al are calling operators, and they've identified 440 actual operators from 3 million patents. And take, for example, the pepper problem. Now, we looked at the pepper problem from Altshuler's matrix, and you get some hints. If you put the pepper problem into the Innovation Workbench software, Innovation Workbench software will pull up for you an operator that says increase and then abruptly drop the pressure. So increasing and abruptly dropping the pressure is an operator. And that operator comes in the patent database in a variety of different situations. So suppose that you were in the diamond business and your job is to split diamonds. So diamonds have flaws in them, and the idea is to identify where the flaw is. Then you can do this mechanically with a hammer and a chisel. Put the chisel over where the spot is of the flaw of the diamond, and then see if you can break the diamond right where the flaw is, so that you can polish both halves of the diamond and get 2 flawless pieces. So doing this mechanically, like cleaning the pepper seeds mechanically, is a very tedious, laborious process. But the solution to the diamond problem existed already in the food industry with the peppers. But do you think anybody from the diamond industry would look at the food industry for solution? No. Or even if they saw the solution, they wouldn't recognize it because of their psychological bias. So Altshuler tried to strip the psychological bias, and modern Triz just tries to give you the operator. And the same principle for the peppers applies to diamonds. They put the diamonds in a chamber, increase the pressure. Instead of 5 to 8 atmospheres, you increase it to a couple thousand atmospheres of pressure. And you hold. So you've got several thousand atmospheres of pressure outside the diamond. Where the flaw is, there's 1 atmosphere of pressure. As you hold for time, the atmosphere diffuses into the diamond, and the pressure equalizes. So where the flaw is becomes several thousand atmospheres of pressure, where the flaw is and outside the diamond. Then they release the pressure in the chamber. You have several thousand atmospheres of pressure where the flaw is, 1 atmosphere where outside the diamond cracks exactly where the flaw is, and you get perfect break. So you can crack a lot of diamonds very quickly, very easily, using that operator. Slowly increase and abruptly drop the pressure. Cleaning filters. So here's a filter that separates water from sand using felt. It works effectively until the filter's clogged up with sand, and then it's really tough to clean. But the same principle, increasing then abruptly dropping pressure, causes the sand to just fly off the filter, and you can clean it very easily. And I was in